Today, we're exploring one of the most astonishing transformations in human history. We're going to look at how a highly vulnerable boy, born in the harsh conditions of exile, somehow managed to transform himself into one of history's most brilliant, formidable, and powerful empire builders. We are, of course, talking about Jalaluddin Muhammad Akbar, known to the world as Akbar the Great.
Okay, let's dive right into this incredible story. And we're starting with this number, 14. That was the exact age our protagonist was when he was hastily crowned emperor. You see, after the sudden death of his father, Humayun, Akbar's guardian, Bayram Khan, actually covered it up just long enough to get the kid ready to rule. So, picture this. It's February 1556, and a 14-year-old boy is sitting on a newly built platform in Punjab, suddenly proclaimed Shahanshah, or King of Kings.
What's really wild about his situation is just how impossible it all seemed. Sure, Akbar spent his childhood learning to hunt and fight, but he never actually learned to read or write. He couldn't read a single one of his own decrees, and the kingdom he inherited as a teenager, it was literally falling apart, heavily threatened by rival rulers who had just swooped in and recaptured vital cities like Agra and Delhi. It was a completely fractured mess.
So, here's the roadmap for our explainer today. We're looking at the boy king's inheritance, forging a gunpowder empire, conquering the subcontinent, securing the imperial frontiers, and finally, administering a vast empire. Let's kick things off with Section 1, the boy king's inheritance, surviving the early years.
Right off the bat, Akbar's life was defined by chaos. Born back in 1542 in a remote Rajput fortress while his dad was running from enemies, he grew up far away from any stable court. But man, he grew up fast. By age 9 in 1551, he's appointed governor of Ghazni. And then, bam, 1556, he abruptly takes the throne. Naturally, being so young, the initial survival of his reign relied heavily on the guidance of his regent, Bayram Khan, just to keep his head above water.
And let me tell you, survival was definitely not a sure thing. The Mughal grip on power was practically non-existent. A rival general named Humayun had actually proclaimed himself a Hindu emperor, kicked the Mughals out of the Indo-Gangetic plains, and taken Delhi. Pushed by Bayram Khan, Akbar took his vastly outnumbered army and marched straight for Delhi. They clashed with Humayun's massive forces at the Second Battle of Panipat in November 1556. Against all odds, they pulled off a decisive win. That victory was literally the razor's edge between the Mughal dynasty surviving or going totally extinct.
Moving into Section 2, forging a gunpowder empire and how he revolutionized Mughal warfare.
To make sure his empire actually had a future, Akbar went all in on new technology. He completely reorganized the military ranks into a strict hierarchy. But the real game changer? The weapons. He got his hands on matchlocks and advanced firearms from Ottoman allies, plus European contacts like the Portuguese and Italians. He brought in heavy cannons and mastered complex siege tactics. He essentially built a terrifyingly effective gunpowder empire.
In 1556, the Indian subcontinent is a fractured, highly volatile landscape, a massive, varied terrain heavily fortified by rival kings and hostile to outside conquerors. This is the environment a 13-year-old boy named Akbar inherits. Following the sudden death of his father, Akbar is crowned Mughal emperor, but the title is practically meaningless. Rival factions have already ousted his family from the capital of Delhi. He controls almost no land. Guided by his military regent, Bayram Khan, the teenage emperor takes an immediate gamble. They rally their forces and march on Delhi, crushing the rival Sur army at the brutal Second Battle of Panipat to miraculously reclaim the throne. Akbar's father and grandfather had treated India as a temporary stopover, exiled rulers who yearned to return to Central Asia. Akbar makes a different calculation. He brings the royal families down from Kabul and decides the Mughals will stay. But winning a single battle for the capital only secures a precarious foothold. Akbar is still a foreign invader in a land held by powerful Rajput clans and entrenched Afghan lords, all of whom have spent decades fighting to keep the Mughals out of India. Akbar begins by modernizing his military. We can see the results of this focus in surviving artifacts like this heavy bronze cannon. He integrates Ottoman-style matchlock firearms and artillery alongside the traditional charges of armored war elephants. He applies this new military machine with absolute ruthlessness. In 1568, his forces breach the massive walls of the Chittorgarh fortress in Rajputana. To send a chilling psychological message to any other resisting states, Akbar orders the massacre of 30,000 surviving defenders and non-combatants. With the interior pacified by fear, he pushes his borders outward from Delhi, launching targeted campaigns west into Gujarat and east into Bengal. Securing these coasts connects his landlocked military engine directly to lucrative global maritime trade routes. To mark the geographical and economic triumph in Gujarat, he erects monumental victory architecture, like the sprawling red sandstone Buland Darwaza Gateway. The cannons, the strategic massacres, and the rapid territorial expansion proved Akbar's military supremacy. He had the tactical strength to draw the borders of an empire. Despite these victories, the empire is bleeding. In the 1560s, Akbar faces constant uprisings from his own Uzbek generals and regional clans, who simply wait for the Mughal army to march away before reclaiming their lands. Garrisoning every single city in a subcontinent this vast is a mathematical impossibility. So Akbar overhauls the state structure. He introduces the mansabdari system, a precise hierarchy where every official is assigned a numerical rank and paid directly by the central treasury. This strips local warlords of their ability to amass independent armies. Rather than fighting a war of attrition against the remaining Rajput kings, he marries their princesses. He brings former enemies into his inner circle, forging blood alliances that tie their family legacies to his own. He then extends this conciliation to the broader population. He abolishes the jizya, a highly unpopular sectarian tax levied on Muslims, and elevates Hindu officials to the absolute highest ranks of his government and military. By combining a centralized payroll with radical religious tolerance, Akbar shifts the power dynamic of his rule. These policies turn his former enemies into the very administrators and generals responsible for the empire's survival. By the end of his nearly 50-year reign, the empire has tripled in both size and wealth. Standardized imperial currency, like this gold mohur coin, drives a booming, globally connected economy. This immense wealth funds a cultural renaissance. Architects merged Timurid Islamic domes with indigenous Indian stone carving, creating a distinct, highly sophisticated Indo-Persian aesthetic across his new cities. As his empire stabilizes, Akbar transitions from a warlord into a philosopher. Inside the ornate pillars of the Diwan-i-Khas, he hosts fierce theological debates, inviting Muslim, Hindu, Jain, and Christian scholars to argue the nature of the divine. He eventually attempts to formalize this intellectual curiosity by creating Deen-e-Ilahi, a syncretic creed that blends elements of Islam, Hinduism, Christianity, and Zoroastrianism in an attempt to achieve total cultural unity. That specific religion dies with him in 1605, but the underlying philosophy is why he is remembered as the Great. Akbar built an institution that survived for centuries because he knew exactly when to swing a sword to conquer a territory and when to lower it to govern a people. In 1540, the Mughal Empire was effectively erased. Rival Afghan forces shattered the army of Emperor Humayun, forcing the dynasty to flee into the blistering deserts of Sindh as refugees. It was here, in a remote fortress, that Akbar was born in 1542. He was the heir to a kingdom that no longer existed, a prince born in the shadow of total dynastic collapse. While Humayun eventually reclaimed Delhi in 1555, he died just months later. This left a 14-year-old illiterate Akbar to defend a precarious throne against a sea of enemies. The crisis was immediate. A general named Humayun had already seized the plains, and Akbar's advisors were begging him to abandon India and retreat to the safety of Kabul. A battlefield victory would save Akbar's life, but his dynasty faced a deeper existential threat. He had to transform the Mughals from mobile Central Asian raiders into a permanent, settled power that the subcontinent could no longer ignore. In 1556, the Mughals met Humayun's army at the Second Battle of Panipat. Under the guidance of his regent, Bayram Khan, the teenage Akbar secured a victory that returned Delhi to Mughal control. But Akbar soon realized that surviving the enemy outside was only half the struggle. Allowing his powerful nobles to hold the reins of government invited instability and future rebellion. He began a violent consolidation of authority. He dismissed his regent Bayram Khan, and when his foster brother Adham Khan challenged him, Akbar personally threw him from a palace terrace, then ordered him dragged back up and thrown a second time to ensure his death. By systematically eliminating internal rivals and distributing power among specialized ministers, Akbar conclusively proved he was shedding the fragmented warlord culture of his ancestors to become an absolute, highly centralized ruler. This map shows the rapid outward territorial expansion of Mughal control radiating from Delhi. Shifting into a tactical diagram, we see the integration of matchlocks and heavy cannons breaking through traditional cavalry formations that dominated Indian warfare for centuries. This military machine faced its ultimate test in Rajputana, where the most prestigious and resistant warriors of India refused to submit. The primary target was Chittorgarh Fort. Its massive walls and high elevation commanded the main routes from the imperial heartland to the wealthy coastal ports. During a brutal 4-month siege, Akbar personally directed the placement of heavy artillery, using his gunpowder technology to systematically dismantle the fortress's ancient stone defenses. The aftermath was a deliberate message to the rest of India. Akbar ordered the brutal massacre of 30,000 survivors, displaying their severed heads on towers to vividly demonstrate the ultimate cost of resistance. The fall of Chittorgarh proved to every remaining kingdom that the traditional methods of resisting the Mughal gunpowder engine were completely futile. Territorial expansion alone could not secure the empire. Many of Akbar's elite generals still viewed Kabul as their true home, treating their Indian conquests as temporary outposts rather than a permanent homeland. To fix his court in place, Akbar took a radical step. He explicitly ordered the royal women and families of the Mughal elite to be brought directly from Kabul down to India. His chronicler, Abul Fazl, noted the specific intent behind the move. It was a calculated effort to force the Mughal elite to settle down and stop longing for the Central Asian highlands they left behind. This wealth is visible in the scale of the Bulan Darwaza Gateway, built to commemorate victories in Gujarat and signal the transition to monumental power. For 13 years, Akbar remained in the north, launching aggressive campaigns to lock down the frontiers against Uzbek and Safavid threats. By importing his families and sealing the borders, Akbar transformed a band of transient conquerors into a settled, unshakable state. Once the military campaigns secured the land, Akbar established a highly centralized civil administration to manage it. This new stability caused the economy to explode, tripling the empire's wealth and allowing for a massive patronage of the arts. At places like the Diwan-e-Khas in Fatehpur Sikri, we see the results of this era. Persian and Indian architectural styles were physically woven together into a permanent new aesthetic for the empire. The illiterate boy who had been born in a refugee fort had become the master of a global superpower. Severing the empire's ties to its nomadic, raiding past, his legacy was sealed as Shahan Shah, the King of Kings.